David Enrich drops by to talk about Donald Trump and Deutsche Bank and the interesting story of why Anthony Kennedy left the Supreme Court to make room for Brett Kavanaugh. It's very, very troubling. His new book is Dark Towers. Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, and share it with your friends. And please subscribe to our channel. On the line with us is David Enrich. He is the finance editor at the New York Times and the author of the new book, Dark Towers, Deutsche Bank, Donald Trump, and an Epic Trail of Destruction. His Twitter handle is David Enrich, E-N-R-I-C-H. David, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for writing this brilliant book. I mean, I have not yet had an opportunity to read the entire book, but I have dipped into it in a number of places. We did one of our, we do a book report every day when our commercial stations are on break for our non-commercial stations, and we used your book today. I just think it's spectacular. Today we are seeing, across the news, this assertion broadly that from the U.S. intelligence communities that caused Trump to fire some of his intelligence officials, the most senior people. This briefing to the Intelligence Committee and the U.S. House of Representatives that said that the Russians are trying to interfere in our election right now on behalf of Donald Trump, much as they did in 2016, and just openly asserting that they help, that without their help, Trump might not even have become president in 2016. Why is that?
Why would
Russian oligarchs or the Russian government, and I don't know which it is, I've always assumed that Trump had been laundering money for Russian oligarchs for years and years, and therefore they've been supporting him. But maybe it's Putin and the government itself. But why is it that out of Russia comes support for Donald Trump?
Well, that's a good question. I don't have a clear answer to that. What I can tell you is that because of Donald Trump's very close relationship with Deutsche Bank, that he has been in business with Russians for many years now. And that's a kind of a very symbiotic relationship. I think Russians have been trying to get their money out of Russia, and it's hard to do that in part because the Kremlin makes it hard to do that. And so they've found ways using Deutsche Bank as a conduit to get their money out of Russia into countries like Latvia and then into the United States or Western Europe. And in some cases, that money has ended up in Donald Trump's properties, either things that he owns outright or that he has his name on. And I've heard and reported on specific meetings where Deutsche Bank kind of played this middleman role where it was introducing Trump to very, very wealthy Russians, including some with very close ties to the Kremlin. So there's a lot of smoke here, I think, about the really intimate ties, not only between Deutsche Bank and Donald Trump or Deutsche Bank and Russia, but Deutsche Bank, Trump, and Russia all connected in a row. And, I think there's more, we still have a lot more to learn about that, but there's a tremendous amount of circumstantial evidence that connects all three of them.
I recall in the weeks before Donald Trump took the call from President Erdogan of Turkey that the U.S. had to pull out of northern Syria and stab the Kurds in the back, basically, a move that has now led to 800,000 refugees and countless, just massive bloodshed. That Erdogan had made a remark in the that was reported in the press that Donald Trump owned 2 Trump Towers in Turkey and that Erdogan had the ability to take his name off them. To what extent is there any evidence out there that you can report on or have reported on in your book, Dark Towers, we're talking with David Enrich, that Trump's foreign policy is being shaped by the fact that he's got Trump Towers in Turkey, he's got Trump Towers in the Philippines, and so he's dancing with Duterte. He obviously wants to build a Trump Tower and probably was going to, I believe, after the election, had he not won in Moscow. And other countries, and some of the stand countries, he's got towers in some of those places, very, very corrupt countries. To what extent is there any evidence that our foreign policy is being shaped by Trump's financial interests?
I haven't seen any evidence of the foreign policy being affected by that. In fairness, I haven't really looked at that issue. What I have looked at, though, that I think is also kind of answers your question, is that there are other elements of policy that do appear, at least circumstantially, to have been possibly affected by Trump's financial interests. And the clearest example to me is with the Justice Department, where Deutsche Bank, Trump's lender of last resort for the past 20 years, has had a very active criminal investigation into the bank for Russian money laundering that was nearing a conclusion, I understand, toward the end of the Obama administration. And as soon as the Trump administration took over, that investigation just went completely silent. And I've talked to a lot of people inside the bank who said that initially they just figured that this is a product of a presidential transition underway and that it was probably just put on a back burner for a moment, not that it was completely shut down. And then weeks passed and months passed, and now a couple of years have passed. And at least for some people inside the bank, their conclusion is that they are beneficiaries of Trump's Justice Department basically having called off the dogs, because the last thing the president wants to do is draw further attention to the fact that he is deep in debt to a foreign financial institution, especially one that has a very well-established track record of laundering money for wealthy Russians and for people close to the Kremlin. That's not a good look for the president.
Yeah. Hey, a friend of mine who's a Democratic member of Congress told me on the QT that there was concern. He mentioned that Justice Department investigation under the Obama administration into Deutsche Bank, and suggested that and this was just rumor, right? Let's just be very clear. This is rumor. That Justin Kennedy, Justice Anthony Kennedy's son, who was the head of the big money, you know the exact name for it. What was the branch at Deutsche Bank?
He was a senior executive in the commercial real estate division.
Okay, and he was the guy who was helping raise money for Trump and signing off on loans for Trump. That he was one of the targets of that criminal investigation, and that Trump used that to convince his father, Anthony Kennedy, who's in great health and just doing fine, that he should resign from the Supreme Court so that he could get was it Brett Kavanaugh on there? Replacing him, so that he could get Brett Kavanaugh on the court. And this was the buzz that was going on in Democratic circles in D.C. Have you discovered anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I've spent a lot of time looking into that, and I think Dark Towers tells this story about what really happened with Justice Kennedy and his son Justin and the Kavanaugh nomination in Deutsche Bank, I think in kind of the first time in an authoritative way.
Can you summarize that very quickly for us?
Yeah, I mean, I want to avoid giving away big details in the book, but I'll tell you that there's something to it, but it's not quite as sexy as it sounds like your source, and I know this rumor has been going around. And I've not seen any evidence that Justin Kennedy was under investigation or anything like that. It is true that Justin Kennedy was one of the kind of lead point people on the Trump relationship in the 2000s, a period during which Trump received well over $1 billion from Deutsche Bank that no other bank was willing to provide, because he had this track record of defaulting on his loans. And the relationship that Justin Kennedy and Donald Trump built during that time period proved very strong and very long-lasting. And so when Trump took office, and obviously Scalia was gone. Scalia had died, and so he already had one person to put on or to nominate for the court, and he really wanted a second to make his permanent imprint on the court. And the way to do that with someone like Kennedy, who, as you said, I think was in good health, they needed to increase. The Trump administration, the White House, needed to increase Anthony Kennedy's comfort level with how the Trump administration was going to handle stuff, whether it was picking his successor, but also just Trump's personal credibility. And I can tell you, again, without going into too many details, because I don't want to spoil the book, and there was a charm offensive that the White House embarked on, and part of that involved appealing directly to Anthony Kennedy about the work that Justin had done for Donald Trump at Deutsche Bank. Wow. And so it's now, to be clear, I'm not sure there's anything illegal. In fact, I don't think there is anything illegal about that. I'm not sure if there's anything improper. It's certainly unusual.
Yeah.
And I mean, that was a turning point in the Trump presidency. And conservatives, prior to the Kavanaugh nomination, I think were really losing patience with Trump. His presidency was really on the rocks. And so Deutsche Bank, through these indirect connections that it had fostered over the year with Trump, in some ways really helped stabilize the Trump presidency at this crucial moment. And it's ironic because over and over and over again during Trump's years as a businessman, where he really was not a very successful businessman, Deutsche Bank over and over again came to rescue and stabilize his floundering businesses. And so now you've got him in the first year of his presidency kind of stepping in to stabilize his floundering presidency as well. So it's ironic and interesting, and I think I think it'll surprise a lot of people.
Yeah. We just have 2 minutes here until we hit a hard break that I can't stop. I'm wondering, number one, if you're of the opinion that Donald Trump actually has a negative net worth, as David K. Johnson has been asserting for years and years. And then secondly, what's it going to take for us to find out what the true story is behind, Trump's association with Deutsche Bank and all these others?
Well, I think this book tells that story pretty comprehensively for the first time, but there's still a lot of secrets out there, including things like Trump's net worth, how much he's paying in taxes, and most important, where he's getting his money. And Deutsche Bank has a lot of those answers stored in its electronic vault, and it is ready, I understand, to hand that over to congressional investigators. But it's waiting on the Supreme Court hearing and Supreme Court decision that will take place later this year. And if the Supreme Court rules against the Trumps, Deutsche Bank is going to fork over all this information, and it's probably going to end up in the hands of Congress and therefore the public. So there's a lot more to come on this story, I think. David
Enrich is the author. The book is Dark Towers, Deutsche Bank, Donald Trump, and an Epic Trail of Destruction. I've read parts of the book. It's absolutely extraordinary. I encourage you to get a copy of it. Dark Towers is the book. David, thanks so much for dropping by today and sharing your thoughts with us.